Well, good evening, everyone. At least here in Europe, it's evening, 5 p.m. GMT. And very happy that you are joining us for meditation. You know, one day I'll get my fifth ray in order here so that all of these broadcasts come through the way they should. Yesterday we had some concern that anything was going to happen, but I do have the new edited version without all of those anxious words in the beginning, so where you can listen to that if you like, or suggest that your friends may listen. Well, you know, the reappearance of the Christ, it is the major event on our planet at this time, and in a way it holds the fate of humanity in the balance. Somehow in those old days in the Garden of Gethsemane, the Christ, who had already been head of the hierarchy for some 500 years, came in contact with a new, for him, and higher aspect of the divine life, the divine will. And, you know, he was preparing then for the sixth initiation, which is taken as the monad. And he did an amazing thing. He anchored that divine will for the sake of humanity, and also agreed to stay another 2,500 years. Usually the Bodhisattva's term of office is 2,500 years, but he, seeing the danger which lay ahead, and which we can certainly see at this present time, he volunteered for a 500 100-year term of office. So I hope that there's not going to be too much intermittency in this stream. We'll do the best we can. Now, I think it's important somehow to read the Reappearance of the Christ every year. It's a wonderful little book, and it presents the kind of knowledge about the Christ which is not in the possession of those who do not have the esoteric point of view. And so, I certainly try to do that. I think it'll take us longer as we're reading through this way to finish the book, longer than 1 year. But we'll continue with that and then start again, because there's always deeper knowledge and participation to be gained if we really study carefully. So we had reached a point here where, I'll just do a little segue here. We're on page 56 or so. I think last week there was not a presentation because it came on the same day as the full moon. So he comes to correct the mistakes and the misinterpretations of those who have dared to interpret his simple words in terms of their own ignorance, and I might add their own complication, and to recognize those whose faithful service has made his return possible. DK says, well, in a way it's a return, but in another way it's not, because he's never left his beloved humanity, and he's always supervised from the inner planes with the help of his hierarchy, and especially with the help of the Master Jesus as regards the Christian Church. Going on, he too is facing a major test, preparatory to a great initiation. That's the 7th, I do believe, which he's already begun. And when he has passed the test and fulfilled his task, he will pass to a still more exalted position in the Father's house, maybe, here earth service and Shambhala, or to some distant place of service where only the most exalted can follow him. And we're informed that the Christ will be taking the Ray path, which is the 5th of the paths of higher evolution, and he will be, as it were, embodying a great ray of love wisdom. The Buddha too will be moving on a different path. As regards the Christ, whatever path he may be taking, his final destiny, at least in the, we would consider it long-term, but probably it's considered short-term in this context, will be to the Sun, Sirius, and the system that exists in relation to that sun. And his present position will then be taken by the one whom he has prepared and trained, and that would be, at this point, the head of the second Ray Ashram, the Master Kuthumi, in whom Master DK is a leading disciple. So that's the segue, and now we'll go on here. I don't know how much I'm going to read, but it's our chance to contemplate together what DK has said about this fascinating and vitally important subject. So, but before all this can happen, he must again enter the public arena. well, you know, where he played his part for approximately 3 years, 2,000 years ago, and he entered, I think he had a lot to do with the Master Jesus before that in terms of training, but he took over his role and his ministry and in the body of the initiate Jesus from the time of the baptism. So he must again enter the public arena, play his part in world affairs, and prove the scope of his mission. And this is an extremely difficult task, and DK talks about the Christ looking on at what is expected of him with a certain horror regarding the demands, and we wouldn't think of the great world teacher as having that kind of response, but such is his sensitivity and deep understanding of what will be required of him that it's very possible that he views his task in this way. Then going on, he will gather round him in the flesh. Note that, okay? His chosen associates and advisors. These will not be the ones who gathered around in the earlier simpler days, but those members of our human family who today recognize him and are preparing to work with him as far as in them lies. So they will be disciples of some standing. And, it's quite interesting to realize that while the Buddha, some 500 or 600 years before the Christ made his appearance, some 2,000 years ago, gathered around himself a group of those who were either arhats, fourth degree initiates, or becoming arhats, and the Buddha being basically on the verge of being a sixth degree initiate. Well, the development of those that the Christ gathered around him were on a lower turn of the spiral. And basically they were pretty much initiates of the first degree, and maybe at the Pentecost, with the tongues of flame descending and the injunction to go forth and spread the good news, well, maybe they reached the second degree, but they were not advanced initiates. But here he will be surrounded by his masters of the wisdom and by quite advanced disciples, and those that are thoroughly committed to him and understand the occult, esoteric patterns behind what he's doing. So it's a different kind of appearance, and it was 3 years that he was with us fully and in a public way in the past, and now it's going to be pretty much an entire equinoctial age, a lesser age of Aquarius, the duration of which is approximately 2,160 years. So it's of a different scope entirely. Going on here, it is a different world to which he is now planning to return, and this is largely due to the intellectual development of the mass of men. Remember that the age of Pisces is not just the age of Pisces, it's the age of Pisces Virgo. As then Rudyard says, no stick has only one end. And what an intellectually acute and mercurial sign Virgo is, raising the masses of men into a new level of intellectual development and rather practical intellectual development. So that now exists. Going on, this presents him with stupendous difficulties, for the intellects of men must now be reached. Note that, okay? And that's where people like ourselves come in, because we are trained on the mental plane, and Master DK is a highly mental master. So the intellects of men must now be reached, and not just their hearts, as in the earlier days, if the will of God is to be intelligently carried out on earth. Maybe there were many saintly people at the time, but they weren't necessarily intelligent. I think about this man who, what was his name? Now a saint, okay? Saint Simeon Stylitis, something of that nature. He just decided to live his life on top of a pillar and stayed there for years. I don't know the details of it, but this was to prove his dedication. There was another man, I don't think it was the same one as I just mentioned, but he held out his hand and never let it down straight until it withered, and somehow this was to explain or to prove to the onlookers that he was a man of faith. Well, you know, are those acts really intelligent in terms of the divine plan? Well, they were certainly dedicated and certainly committed, but maybe not so intelligent. His major task is surely the establishing of right human relations in every department of human living. Now that's the Christ, okay? The will of God to be carried out on earth, and the big theme, one of the big themes of Shambhala on this particular globe and chain is right human relations. So the major task of the Christ is surely the establishing of right human relations in every department of human living, and just review the departments and see to what extent true right human relations exist. Here and there is the flowering of such relations, and other place human beings seem to take advantage of each other. Going on, I would ask you to use your imagination and endeavor to think out what must be the implications of the task which confronts him. I wonder if any of us have really done that. You know, normally we're so self-centered, we think about our particular status, our particular difficulties, you know, what's going on in our lives spiritually, but to transpose one's consciousness into the vision of the Christ as he contemplates the task ahead of him, maybe it's rather rare. Let's just take a minute and do that. I do recommend that we take some time to think ahead, to attempt to see what the Christ sees. I mean, of course, it's not entirely possible, but we're trying to develop the mind as it is in Christ, and I'm sure there will be some revelations. I mean, he has to speak to the masters and to the initiates and disciples and people aligned with every one of the 7 ashrams, and he has to speak their language. He has to be able to communicate with these people whose approaches are so very different. So what great scope of understanding that must take. And then he has to bring them together into a field of cooperation. Well, we all know what it's like to try to get people to cooperate these days, and especially when they are focused ashramically in a different manner and on different rays. But one suspects that he is magnetically, intellectually, intuitively, willfully equipped to do that. Okay, I would ask you says the Tibetan, to ponder on the difficulties which he must inevitably face. The difficulty, above all, of mass intellectual wrong emphasis. Well, the mind is developed all right, but what is it pursuing? You know, when I look in the papers, I see, or on the on the computer, for these news feeds, I see people experimenting with all kinds of things which got us into trouble in ancient Atlantis. So not very smart to repeat those things. Tampering with the hereditary system that is put in place to keep the different orders of life in a state of integrity. When you start mixing monkeys and human beings and rats and human cells and all the rest of it, we're in dangerous territory there, you know, and you can be sure that there would be an attempt to build some kind of, what to call them, slave races who would serve the needs of man. And that's not allowed. It's not part of the plan. It's not allowed. But it might be possible. Anyway, a little bit more. There's a lot to think about. He, the representative of the love of God, is asked to work again. Well, he's chosen to, hasn't he? But maybe Sanat Kumara, in a way, asked him, is asked to work again in the world arena wherein his earlier message has been negated, forgotten, or misinterpreted for 2,000 years, and wherein hate and separativeness have distinguished all men everywhere. Whoa. So, you know, immediately we see this incredible challenge. And, you know, the finger is pointing to every one of us. That somehow we, all of us, have been characterized by hatred and separativeness. The one great heresy, the heresy of separativeness or of separateness. This will plunge him into a foreign atmosphere and into a situation wherein all his divine resources will be needed and will have to be tried out to the uttermost. And that's the method of growth, you know. Use everything you've got to the uttermost, and even we who have so much less than he, when we use our resources to the uttermost, then consciousness inevitably is enhanced, and a form through which to work in a better way is given. So he's undergoing a great test here, is he not? The generally accepted idea that he will return as a triumphant warrior, omnipotent and irresistible, has surely no basis in fact. Okay. Well, right there we're gonna get into some trouble with our friends of faith, you know, who have been taught this for the longest time and adhere to it as a great guarantee of their own salvation. Going on, that he will ultimately lead his people, who are his people, not just Christians, of course, his people, humanity, into Jerusalem. Well, is a fact, but what is Jerusalem, okay? Founded on a secure foundation, but it will not be into a Jewish city called Jerusalem, but into, quote, the place of peace, as the word Jerusalem means. The place of peace. It's related to Shambhala, the only place of pure and perfect peace on our planet. A careful consideration of the world situation today, and a dedicated use of the imagination will reveal to the sincere thinker how appalling is the task which he has undertaken. You know, if we pause on that one for just a moment, trying to see things from his point of view, we may come to realize that, you know, it would certainly stagger all of us. We'd be completely incapable, and maybe only a becoming initiate of the seventh degree, so equipped with the love energy, can somehow handle it. I mean, you know, we try to solve our own personal little problems in our own little sphere and find that, you know, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. It's enough to try to do it on a limited scale. But look at, he's got the whole world in his view and all of humanity to, in a way, save. You know, we have to talk about the meaning of that word. But he, the Christ, has again, quote, set his face to go to Jerusalem. So that's from Luke 9:51, and that means Sagittarius. You know, when DK explained how the zodiacal signs work out in the story of the Christ, when he set his face to go to Jerusalem, it was a Sagittarian act. He will reappear and guide mankind into a civilization and a state of consciousness in which right human relations and worldwide cooperation for the good of all will be the universal keynote. Well, right now, you know, there are, that type of thinking is very rare. Maybe it's found, you know, in such high church luminaries as Bishop Tutu and in the Dalai Lama from a different stream. The appalling task. I guess I have to do this because I didn't get it quite right. Yeah. But imagine getting humanity to cooperate. Well, fortunately, Aquarius is one of those signs in which cooperation is possible, especially when Jupiter, the esoteric ruler, is brought into strong expression. He will, through the new group of world servers and the men of goodwill, complete his association with the will of God. His father's business. You know, he said to his mother, representing the material aspect at the age of 12, "Wist ye not that I must be about my father's business?" So it was a very symbolical kind of statement, and, you know, you kind of wonder who's teaching there in the temple. Is it the Master Jesus, or the Initiate Jesus, who was a third-degree initiate, or is it the Christ in early days, having taken over that vehicle, not in a way so that all people saw, but so that the priests of the period saw. So he will complete his association with the will of God in such a manner that the eternal will to good will be translated by humanity into goodwill and right relations. Then his task will be done. He will be free again to leave us, but this time not to return, but to leave the world of men in the hands of that great spiritual server who will be the new head of the hierarchy of the church, invisible, and as stated, that does seem to be the Master KH, the Chohan KH. So this would be the end of ROC reading, and 22nd of August. And we'll try, of course, to continue with this, as we should. It's such a thrill to read this book, you know, realizing how very real all of these plans are, beginning of ROC on the 29th of August 19, and I'm just going to hope that this thing really sticks here. Close. And yeah, so if all goes well, this is where we'll begin. I went looking for those little notes today and I couldn't quite find them. But, you know, it's just wonderful to think about the great Lord, the head of the hierarchy, the teacher alike of angels and of human beings, you know, to think about him and what he has planned with his church, the hierarchy of the planet, and how I do believe that so many of us in various ways throughout the Aquarian age will be participating with him. So, okay, now, of course, we got to meditate, don't we? And hopefully this will not be too intermittent. As I say, when you're up here north of the Arctic Circle, about 70 degrees north latitude, there's a lot of energetic things that happen, but maybe one of them is not a secure internet. So let us then breathe in the white light and realize that our co-disciples are seen in that light, and with many we are attempting to build and strengthen the Triangles network. It's really a network of soul energy working through the etheric body of individuals and through humanity as a whole. We can't really let up from behind the scenes. No one may see what we're doing. Doesn't make any difference. We're doing. And we're doing in a way that is sanctioned by the hierarchy, and Master DK has given us the instructions. As a matter of fact, he even says, you know, substitute this particular meditation for the meditation you usually do on Thursdays. Well, so it must be important. So let us say we have a certain personality quietness, and we're going to formulate clearly to ourselves and in our own words the answers to the following questions. In a way, we're answering these questions in the light of the soul. Of course, we're using the soul illumined mind to do that, but it's important every week to answer these questions. So, as a member of the new group of world servers, what is my specific fixed intention at this moment of dedicated contact with my soul. Is my concentrated and expressed personality purpose in line with hierarchical intention as far as I am permitted to know it? And have I, in my own personal daily life, earned the right, because of definite effort and not so much because of success, to stand with those servers who are now undertaking the work of preparation? And when we have answered these questions, we have to realize that, okay, we're thinking of ourselves in a personal sense, but more in a soul-infused personal sense, and it helps, says the Tibetan, to align our personality upon the mental plane where we can be or utilize the mind held steady in the light of the soul. So then we have done our best in a weekly way, and who knows what might turn up, to answer these questions weekly. Now, let's say this powerful mantram together. This is really one that, separates the sheep from the goats. And that would be like the ordinary Martian type from the higher Capricornian, Venusian type, who is applying for initiation at this time. Later, Aries, of course, will be the great sign of initiation, even more so than Capricorn, but right now Capricorn is in the ascendancy. So let us say this powerful mantram, which measures our commitment, and for the Finnish people, it's better that I don't try to read this in Finnish, but you see that it is there before you. Forgetting the things which lie behind, I will strive towards my higher spiritual possibilities. I dedicate myself anew to the service of the Coming One, and will do all I can to prepare men's minds and hearts for that event, I have no other life intention. You know, when you reach that last phrase and you think about the reappearance of the Christ and his hierarchy, there's so many worthy things that can be done, but as DK basically said, for those who are simply busy with, albeit the very worthy task of expressing themselves as a soul, they cannot be used in this particular type of sacrificial work. You know, it's a classic story. All the initiates and the high types have their own way of contributing to humanity, as saving humanity, whatever. The Christ, as the fifth degree head of the hierarchy, had his own way before accepting the way of Sanat Kumara in the Garden of Gethsemane. And on a lower turn of the spiral, the rich young man, an initiate of the third degree, had his own way before the Christ offered him the fourth initiation. If he would just take what you have, sell it, give the money to the poor, and follow me. But the rich young man had his own way, and he was not successful as the Christ was successful in the Garden of Gethsemane. Of course, by now he is. No matter how we may fail at a certain moment, we manage to get back on track. So from the practical perspective, let's visualize the world as best we can, and in terms of our major world interests, and with what knowledge of world affairs we may possess. I think it's pretty clear, and it certainly applies today with the way we use resources and the way we direct our interests, that where there is no vision, the people perish. Okay, well, that's our job, to make sure that the quality of the hidden vision, speaking of the second method of inducing soul control, anchors itself within humanity. Okay. See the masses of men everywhere glowing with a dim light. But here and there, points of brighter light where members of the new group of world servers and men of spiritual intention and of loving hearts are working for their fellow human beings. But even further than that, even further than the presence of the new group of world servers among the masses of human beings glowing dimly, we can visualize the vivid light of the hierarchy streaming towards humanity and slowly merging with the light which is already in the human race. We concentrate on humanity, but of course all the subhuman kingdoms are affected, and even superhuman kingdoms through humanity gain their means of expression and take certain next steps. The light, and all of our lights can and will brighten, and we will move just a few steps closer to fulfilling the destiny of our planetary logos to create a fully illumined, sacred planet. And so we will then say, first stanza, from the point of light, within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. That will happen. But the time equation is so much in the hands of humanity, we have to realize that responsibility. Then we ponder on the reappearance of the Christ, realizing that no matter by what name he may be called in the many world religions, he is still the same great identity. And we, of course, that would shock so many people in their various narrow approaches to their own religion. But the day must come when they widen. So let's reflect a little here and speculate upon the possible results of his appearance, reappearance really. We know that he is anxious to appear to his loved humanity. It's frustrating to realize that, and that we ourselves are blocking the way. Maybe even more among the disciples and the aspirants than the average non-aspiring human beings. But the answer comes when we ask how long we have to endure and struggle and fight. The answer comes. He will appear when a measure of peace has been restored. He will know what that measure is. He will appear when the principle of sharing is at least in process of controlling economic affairs. Maybe a long way to go there. And finally, when the churches and the political groups have begun to clean house, well, we see the salutary evidence, and it is a disturbing vision, but okay, it's better to see it. This is occurring, and then he can and will come, and when these requirements are fulfilled to a certain measure, and the kingdom of God will be publicly recognized and no longer be a thing of dreams and wishful thinking. So with this in mind, we say the second stanza of the occasion. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. Well, these points, there are many things, familiar and unfamiliar, and the Christ is in so many ways a point, or the point, of love within hierarchy, and the Buddha the point of light, and the will. There's a point there too, guided by Sanat Kumara. There are different ways and levels of looking at these points, but to think of the Christ as the point of love is initially very useful. So, what we try to do then is to concentrate our fixed intention to serve and to spread love in our surroundings. And we realize, that if we can do these things, we are really attempting to blend our little personal will with the spiritual will and ultimately the divine will. So let us then say the stanza of the great invocation, which is concerned with the power of will. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. So even though what the will really is eludes us, necessarily we're asked to reach in the direction of that will and develop a willingness to carry out the divine plan and purpose as we can conceive it individually and in our groups. to what extent are we carrying out the will of God as we can know it. But we don't just stay up in the air. It's a practical meditation, and we lay our practical plans. What can we do in the coming week to further the preparations for the coming of the Christ? It's done politically, socially, financially, artistically, scientifically. It's done in terms of idealistic incentive. It's done in terms of how we organize our lives and the lives of humanity. All the 7 ashrams, whether or not they are fully mobilized for this task yet, all of them are somehow participating in this reappearance and will be even more so. We are members of a group of 4 runners, just a group John the Baptist, kind of, who are called at this time to act and do our part in the plan. And, well, sometimes we may feel we are a voice crying in the wilderness, as John the Baptist thought, but there's a certain readiness out there for what we have to say, because people have reached a point of frustration and delay, and they don't want it anymore, and we have something to say to them. So 6 more years, 5.5 more years in the era of the 4-runner, and every week to do something with time or money or thought or however to prepare men's minds and hearts for that great event. That is what is required of us. And let us never think, well, we're just one little person here. What difference could it make? And I'm reminded of that beautiful little story Tuya tells about the little bird dropping 1 drop of water at a time on the raging forest fire, while all the others said nothing can be done. And it concludes with her saying, well, at least I did my part. And just imagine, we all have our individual drops of water in the raging samsara of the world. If we all do our part, that raging flame of friction will be dispelled, will be terminated. So let us respond to the vibration of the Christ and commit ourselves in His name. Make Him imaginatively as real to us as we possibly can. And we say, we have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. The Christ is real, factual. The hierarchy, real, factual. The initiates, real, factual. The process under the planetary logos in Sanat Kumara is real and factual. We live on a living planet, which is to become a sacred planet eventually. And we are working within to make sure that these things actually do happen. We'll have plenty of chance to come back and notice our work for 2,000 years. Just imagine now. if you really mean what you say, and if I mean what I say, I have no other life intention, then we've got about 2,000 years to work it out. Now we'll sound the Om 3 times and dedicate the threefold personality to the work of preparation. Well, friends, all of us are needed, and no question about that. So never lose confidence, and always keep the faith in the immortal inner God, which you are, and participate with all you have, esoterically and in other ways, but at least because we are trained in that way, at least esoterically. So we're going to close then with a piece from the Reappearance of the Christ Oratorio. I'll find a time to play that, maybe around the time of Easter, perhaps. And we can meditate accordingly. And this is Christ taking his farewell to humanity after accomplishing all that he has accomplished. And, of course, we with him.
Though I have been with you beyond this field, I am with you. I am with you. I am with you to the end, for I am you, and you are none but I, and we are one in the Father. We are one in the Father. Thus forever I am with you. I am with you. I am with you. You and I, you and
Thank you all. And tomorrow, also in the evening, we have the Reappearance, the Soul of Nations meditation. It'll be a broadcast. Oh, I'm wrong. Excuse me. No, it's the Glamour webinar. That's what it is. Okay, and then on Saturday we have the Reappearance. So, bye for now. Lots of love from Tuya and myself and all the workers in the Moria Federation and the University of Seven Rays and the Blue Rose Sisterhood. Many blessings, lots of love. And bye for now.